Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Mindset Series. I'm Jim Stoyer from Think Heart Strategy. Today, we welcome Ron Culp, a true entrepreneurial thinker, a doer, and a man who has worn many hats, all leading to his success. Welcome, Ron.
Great to be here, Jim.
Our goal is to find businesses and people that have been successful and share with you what makes them unique. So along those lines, Ron, what would you say is your secret to success?
I think mainly, if I look back at all the people I've met over the years, I just find that everybody has an interesting story to share, and I want to hear what they have to say. So I probably, as a result, and you'll see that in anything I do, I prefer listening than talking. Even though I'm going to be doing a lot of talking, probably with you today, I'd really rather listen to you.
That's good. So along those lines, what's your favorite type of client? You've had many of them. Is there one that is better than another or more fun or more endearing to you?
Well, I can't really go into specific names of the ones that I absolutely couldn't stand, but I could tell you the ones that were collaborative, that said they brought us into the process early and really wanted our engagement and thoughts in how to handle something. They were the best clients to work with. Absolutely loved having the advantage of getting to know them so we could kind of finish each other's sentences. And as a result, I thought we became better agency partners with them. I actually learned that from Kathy Baughman and Kevin Lynch, who had their own little firm in Chicago. And all of a sudden, people would come to me saying, they're getting a bigger and bigger share of our PR budget. And I said, yes, look at the results. They're embedded in several of our teams. We can literally take a memo, back then it was on paper, that they would fax over to us and just present it to the C-suite or to the CEO and say, here is our thinking. And as a result, they became more and more important partners to the whole PR program.
So you talked about PR, Ron. You've also worked in many different corporate settings as well. Is there a situation that you feel is better than another relative to inside a company, outside a company, or even on your own? Which one would you say you've had the most impact on?
Well, as you noted, I've worked in all three environments, and there are aspects I loved about all of them, but I probably would come back to saying the ones that I really enjoyed were at a couple corporations that had visionary CEOs that embraced the communications arm and made you a true partner. I also found that controlling the budget helps, because the agency might have, it's going to cost you this, but you only have this. So I really got into those companies and the missions of those companies where they said, go do your best work. And that would have to be around a situation that it was in a corporate environment. You just have more control over what eventually you're going to be able to say and do.
So along those lines, Ron, you've created situations in my mind where you're almost indispensable, to the point where I'm not sure people could ever do something without coming to Ron Culp or getting Ron Culp's input. And to this day, that is the case in your current situation. How did you learn that skill? And is it always benefited you?
Well, I could probably go all the way back to my parents. Are you listening to me, young man? And I found that if you listened, you were probably going to learn a lot more and certainly be less stressed out eventually if you weren't listening. So anyway, not to make too much light of it, but it was an early skill, and I don't know where I learned it, where I just listened. I was one of those people that found that if Well, let me share you a story about working in the agency world when I was at Ketchum, and we'd go into pitches, and I hated doing pitches, by the way, but I then all of a sudden got better at them when one of my colleagues said, "Here's all you need to know. If you what you want to do is understand when you put a pitch together and you want new business, that your goal is to get the client engaged in your pitch." So I early on learned that if you're talking, the client is judging. If they're talking, they're buying. So we started winning more new business when we were able to show the client that we heard what they said, and we would often be able then to recite it back. Oh, yes, it's exactly what we want. And all of a sudden we started winning more business.
So that's interesting, because you've been in many difficult situations that I'm not sure I could even figure out how to extricate myself of, much less succeed. What's your secret to staying in control?
It isn't alcohol, even though I've been accused of it occasionally, because how can you stay so calm in these situations? And I've been through a lot of crises, as you're aware. I think, and the page principles are a good guiding factor. And the one that really sticks out at me is their seventh, and Page is a society of PR leaders from around the world, actually. And Arthur Page is the former head of communications at AT&T, and he actually sat on the board of AT&T back in the glory days. Well, the seventh Page principle is remain calm, patient, and good humored. And I just I just think everything can be, you got to keep that in mind, because if you do, I'm asking myself, is what we're about to do, is it so important that it's a life or death matter? And if it's not, I can probably get through it. If it is a life or death issue that really means life or death, I take it a lot more seriously. I'm not as good humored, probably. I certainly don't make jokes of anything, which I can often do about any situation. And you have to approach that differently. But the key is the organization and management takes you far more seriously if you maintain your cool and not start flapping the minute you hear it. So I seldom think the sky is falling. And as a result, I can probably get through most of those situations. So as a result, let's give it to Culp. He can put it together somehow, and other people might be wringing their hands and what do we do? And look, okay, let's put the team together. And that's also why I gravitate to cooler heads, to be part of team members. You always need that outlier, but you want a good cross-functional team that approaches it with seriousness, but also with that good sense of humor that, hey, we're going to get this solved. It's not worth killing ourselves over.
So it sounds like, Ron, it's an interesting attribute that you described quite extensively in that discussion, which is humor. How do you know when to use it, and how do you know how they're going to take it?
Oh, I've learned that lesson the hard way. It is almost you do have to know when to use it, when not to. I probably have been dinged on performance reviews earlier in my career. So you just that's back to the listening factor, is know who is going to be receptive to it, who's giving you permission in management to use humor, and who thinks you're a wise ass if you do. And so you just have to kind of constantly turn on and off that that sense of humor button. But the other part that I really keep at all times is, I try to at least, is to remain calm. But oh yeah, nothing's worse than saying the wrong thing, meaning you think it's humorous. Many other people are laughing very hard with it, but the one person in senior management that is taking it personally and does think it's life or death is going to think that, oh my God, he's off the rocker. And believe me, early on in my career, it's happened. For some reason, later in life, the more you're around people, the longer you stay in a particular environment, work environment, they are expecting you to. I would be viewed as, oh my gosh, what's wrong with Ron if I didn't bring humor to the situation.
That's interesting. So along those lines, if you had to start all over again, what would you do differently?
Oh, well, a couple of things probably. Education wise, I would have gotten an MBA because I do think it would help me more in the senior ranks. I didn't do badly in any of the jobs I've been in, and I've been very blessed. But I think it might, especially in a corporate environment, might have been helpful. My concern as I reflect back on it, it also might have directed me in a whole new course in my career. That may not have been as satisfying as the one that I happen to enjoy and have enjoyed over the past 40 years.
So the other skill you have that I really appreciate is you can manage a whole mess of things at one time. How do you manage to maintain, if you will, that even keel? When I would get bogged down with about one or two of them, you got 6 or 7 of them juggling at the same time, and you still get it done faster than I could with the one or two. How the heck do you do that?
Well, a lot of it comes with experience, and some just I think it goes back to, I honestly, and I know it sounds trite, I try to surround myself with people that I trust. And I give them credit for what they do. If it was their idea, they're going to get the credit for it. Some people want credit more than others. I just think in the end, if I'm responsible for the communications function of a major corporation, I'm going to get credit if the idea is good, no matter where it came from. So we build a real esprit de corps, and there's some magic to it. And as sad as it is to see what's happened to Sears Roebuck and Company since I left, what absolutely is something that is dear to me is that the PR people who worked there during my 10-year stint have formed a Facebook group that everyone sticks together. And it's basically it's the 10-year period I was there, and people who are members, and so we keep in touch with each other. We get together for lunch occasionally. It is, and the team would say that it was the best moment in the PR history of Sears. There were many other best moments, but it was a golden age that certainly is no longer there, nor is Sears. But I think there's really something to it, and it was a special team, and so I build those special teams wherever I am. And again, it is not part of it's accidental. I just say, oh, I think this person could do it. Let's take a flyer on this other individual, and let's put together a diverse, creative team. Who are we missing? And let's approach all of our issues as a team rather than me dictate, I want this done, and this done. Let's let it bubble up. I make the decision and we move ahead.
So is there any particular job you've had where you feel like you've learned the most?
Probably Sara Lee Corporation was my first real serious, you're now a senior person in a communications function job. Now I was a manager at Lilly, then I became a director at Pitney Bowes. Both really good. I learned a ton through the crises, especially at Lilly during my time there. And then Pitney Bowes was a pretty safe, more marketing focused job. And then I get to Sara Lee, and they had plenty of issues, but they also had a very enlightened Renaissance man as a CEO in John Bryan. And he really taught me to love the arts and to show how doing good in a community will come back favorably to the brand. And as a result, it also helped in the fact that I went to him once with a project we're working on that he wanted us to do, and I said, we're kind of getting into some real money here as far as the cost of this effort. And he goes, "Did I ask you how much?" Yeah. So that would probably go back to one of my favorite experiences in corporate America when I didn't have a budget for most projects. And then, of course, going to Sears, and it was Sears under Arthur Martinez as the CEO that called me into the office one day, and we were talking about an issue. And he said, "Well, rather than me describe the problem, I want you to tell me how you would solve it." And I gave him some top of the mind ideas. And he said, "Okay," called the marketing head in and said, "This is what we're going to do. What do you think?" And I'm like, "Holy cow, I'm a leader."
So, it's interesting you bring that up, Ron. How do you keep that entrepreneurial mindset when you're in a situation that is pretty structured and controlled? How do you get that out of the box thinking, if you will, integrated into a staid conservative environment?
Basically, you have to do a lot of practice and hit and misses. And most senior management lights up when they hear an idea. Now, granted, especially during my Sears days, "Oh, we've tried that. We've tried that." You just have to know what the pushback is going to be. And then how do you shape an idea, recognizing where their heads are, but then, and sometimes it's just small little incremental steps forward. And then other times they'll be very receptive to a bigger idea. And then back to listening, what is the key message that they're not buying into? Getting them to describe it, and then asking the right questions along the way that inch them more towards a more creative solution to a problem we're facing. So 9 times out of 10, it works.
So I've always found that Ron Culp seems to meet people where they're at. You don't put people into a situation where they're going to fail, but you also make them comfortable that, it's okay. So it's almost like your philosophy has pervaded their thinking. How do you create an environment that allows for that?
Well, wow. Good question. It's back to my never really wanting to be a leader, that I like to listen, take it all in, and know everything, and then just kind of parse it out to help people succeed. And so I will entrust a team, and sometimes we make a mistake. I want to keep informed, and I want to create an atmosphere where people tell me what's going on, that I don't get isolated in an environment that I'm only hearing what senior management is saying and what I'm thinking, and maybe a few of my direct reports. So I make sure that everyone in the organization knows, that proverbial expression of "the door's always open." Well, it is. And it is by taking in as much information as possible and knowing the state of the situation from everyone's vantage point, knowing all stakeholder views on it, kind of makes you, very valuable to the organization.
So along those lines, Ron, do you have a business philosophy?
A business philosophy. I guess my business philosophy is like the good old expression that used to exist in my former employer, that the customer is always right, and that what do customers want, and need, not what you want to sell. Very often, it's not what you want to sell, especially in the early days of Sears. Let's sell them this because we bought a lot of it. Well, it's a crappy piece of merchandise. No, just take the loss and make sure, are you listening to the customer? So my philosophy is always on that. And I've also taken it to academia, which is mind-blowing. To some of my colleagues, when they hear me call students customers, but they are. What do they need and want to ensure their success? It's the same as in business. And so when you apply that, maybe call them students rather than customers, you will, but know in the back of your mind, all I see on their foreheads is $32,000 a year. That's their tuition. So they're expecting a lot for that. And as a result, we need to deliver a lot. So I guess that's where I pull the business philosophy is really listen to the customer.
Cool. So what 3 words describe you?
Can I use hyphenated words?
Sure, that will only count as 1 too.
That's what I was after. I wanted permission to go there. Without a doubt, people would say mentor, logical, and then my wife sometimes would disagree with me, but I'd say even-tempered, and you kind of touched on that earlier.
Right. So, Ron, you've been through a lot. You've shared a lot of experiences with us. How do you keep growing when theoretically the cup's almost full?
Well, that's a concern. Sometimes you have to make a decision to move on. If you look at my resume on LinkedIn, you'll detect something called the 7-year itch. I've never really stayed in a job for more than 7 years, even though I was there longer at Sears. Well, if you look at it, I had worked for 2 different CEOs. There were 2 very different companies during that time. So I really looked at having been 7 years, being very lucky with one CEO, and then 3 years of trying to keep the train on the tracks with another CEO. So I find that it's really essential to know when it's time to move on. And very often you don't have to move out of a company to do that, or an agency or an association. You have to identify what other opportunities might exist. I have one mentor who currently works for a big trade association in Chicago. She was ready to move on. And I said, you've been there for a while, but it's a great organization. How about trying to move into another function within that trade association? So she used her networking skills, which we taught her at DePaul, and she's able then to work up. And she sent me this lovely note last week about the fact that she has a significant salary increase, which was important. And more importantly, the organization said, we love you and we don't want you to go anywhere. So they promoted her. And that's kind of what my career has been all about, is either making the right moves internally, again, through the internal network of just getting to know people outside of your function of responsibility, because then you become far more important to the organization. If you know what they're thinking in the legal department, HR department, marketing, and elsewhere, you're far more able to deliver the kind of advice and counsel that is meaningful and is going to probably create the next opportunity for you.
So that's good, Ron. In that answer, you kind of integrated all of how you work, which is you gave a great example of you mentored somebody. I mean, when I asked you for the 3 words to describe you, you gave me a case history of how you mentored somebody. Yeah. Do you think people appreciate how much you do relative to helping them? And how, if they don't respond, do you react?
Well, I wish I was in the office today, because I'd pull out in my drawer. I've saved every thank you note. People actually wrote them on paper. And even lately, I mean, they obviously know that people need to be in touch. There's a lot of thank you notes. And I invariably, and I stay in touch with most of the young people who've gone through our program that want to be connected. Some just go on to other opportunities. But you're basically, if you're in the field of communications and we've met somewhere along the way, I stay in touch with thousands of young people. And that's my joy. And when you meet and run into somebody who you haven't seen in 10 years, and they tell you your influence, and not just mine, other people in our program as well, have this same commitment to the students, our customers, that they've now turned into friends. And nothing makes you more excited than when you see their promotions. And I probably not once a week, 3 or 4 times a week, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm sending congratulatory notes to people who've just been promoted, who I've known along the years, young people who are moving up in their careers. And, whether or not there's any, thank you back, doesn't need to be. It's just a prideful moment that they're succeeding. And in 9 times out of 10, again, they're responding quickly. There's a couple on LinkedIn right now, just this week, of people saying, thanks for your guidance. I'm now in this position. And that's what it's all about. It's I have no idea why I have done it and spend so many hours of a week doing it, but there are great rewards in doing so.
Well, I really appreciate, Ron, you sharing your wisdom and personal experiences. I mean, every anecdote you have really makes it show that you manage and lead from the heart. So we really appreciate you being on today, and thank you for helping us learn more about how Ron Culp has been so successful.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it.
I'm Jim Stoyer, reminding you that merging the mind and heart through marketing leads to your business's success.